Chapter 121. Black-clothed man. If Hushi were here now, she would have been shocked to find that the woman in this picture is a 7 out of 10 in similarity with her transformed appearance. Lingyue, Lingyue. Nailan Zhengzi repeated the woman's name over and over again. With an intoxicated expression on his face, he kissed the lips of the woman in the picture and murmured, "Lingyue, do you know how much I miss you?" He had barely spoken when suddenly, an hysterical-like light shone in his eyes born from insanity and hate. Retreating back a step, he roared, "You're just my concubine. But why do you look down on me? Why don't you obey me?" At this moment, a crackling sound could be heard coming from below the spiral staircase. Following that, a beast-like roar with banging and scratching sounds echoed. Nailan Zhengzi's lips raised in a smirk, and laughing twice, he looked at the stunning woman in the picture, his face twisted with an evil smile. "Lingyue, aren't you so proud and strong? But did you ever think that the child you would give birth to would fall into my hands for me to take advantage of? Ha 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 ha." Because of the intrusion of the black-clothed men, Hushi didn't go to sleep. Rather, she meditated in her space. She discovered that although she is unable to store spiritual power and advance cultivation bases, with the spiritual energy entering her body repeatedly, it cleansed her meridians. So whether it is in strength or speed, she has the qualifications to advance. Regarding internal power and martial arts, she is now one rank higher than she was in her previous life. As for the skill to conceal herself, she's already at a much higher rank than the low-level martial artists in this world. While cultivating, time passed slowly, and soon, the pitch-black night sky outside her space slowly lightened, and streaks of golden light colored the eastern sky. Hushi lazily stretched her body, and just as she was about to exit her space, a sudden chill flashed through her body, leaving her slightly numb. It was like there were countless insects crawling along her spine, causing every nerve in her body to become taut. The black-clothed men. It's those black-clothed men again. Moreover, there's still 4 of them. However, the difference between the group from last night and the group now is that this group of black-clothed men have a frightening manner about them. They weren't concealing the sharp killing intentions they exuded. Even if these people were still far away, Hushi was able to smell the strong reek of blood their bodies carried. No one was more familiar than Hushi about what those kind of people were like. Those kind of people were without the slightest scruple, becoming joyful at the thought of slaughter. Her complexion changed, and quickly getting up, she ordered Shijia and the others to flee with Wet Nurse Chun and Shaoli into Tsang Mountain. Wet Nurse Chun was reluctant to escape and leave Hushi alone, but she was efficiently knocked out by Hushi, who then threw her to Shijia, properly protect Wet Nurse Chin and Shaoli. "Without my order, no one is allowed to return." Shijia and the others hesitated as they worriedly looked at Hushi, but their instinct to obey made them grit their teeth and nod. Tears clung to Shaoli's face, and choking back sobs she said, "Miss, have I brought trouble to you?" "I'm not leaving, I want to stay with you." Hushi sneered, "Do you want me to knock you out too? No matter who the people are that come, I have a way to deal with them. I don't need you all to worry about it." Pausing, she then continued and said, "Keep watch over our home for me." Chapter 122. Powerless Antright, Our Home. Although it has only been a short time period of little more than a month, she has regarded this courtyard as home, the people in this courtyard as her family. She will not allow her family to meet with mishap. For any person who dares to touch those she cares about, she will definitely let them pay a painful price. Shaoli's face gradually showed a firm look of dedication, and wiping her tears, she repeatedly nodded her head. Her expression of one making a promise. Shijia, Shaoli, and the others had just left, when several black-clothed men using flying swords rapidly descended on the empty ground of the small courtyard. They of course saw that weak old woman and child running to hide in Tsang Mountain. So one person amongst them who was fiddling with a dagger in his hand sneeringly asked, "Do I need to rush over and get rid of those useless people?" Another person replied with, "Our boss's order was that the patron only wanted Nailan Hushi's life. We don't have any business with the rest." Did he think our drought demon organization, full of gold medal assassins, was a vegetable market? That when we receive a mission we also include a service of giving a gift? The two other people burst into loud laughter, their gazes landing on one of the small houses in the courtyard. The person who was previously talking slightly raised an eyebrow as he said, "I really didn't expect that the third miss, the legendary trash of Nayland Manor, would have such courage, letting her servants leave first and staying behind to throw her life away. Tisk tsk. So interesting." Another young voice couldn't help but grumble, "I don't know what our boss was thinking. She's only trash without a cultivation base, that's all. She hasn't even reached the chi refining stage. Is it necessary to use all four of us together to dispose of her? All right, our boss decided it like this, so naturally he has reason. As long as we obediently obey his orders, then that will be enough. Xiaoba, you go, efficiently bring the young Mrs. Severed Head out here. We'll wait for you." If people knew that we, four Grand Meridian stage martial artists, killed an ordinary person together, wouldn't we be a laughing stock? Xiaoba, the youngest martial artist, muttered as he obediently pushed the door open and walked to where Hushi's room was located. The three other assassins remained in the small courtyard, leisurely chatting. They were completely unworried about whether Xiaoba would be able to kill that girl or not. After all, one is a Meridian stage martial artist, while the other one is an ordinary person without a cultivation base. It was like a human and an ant. If stepped on, the ant would die. So how could be afraid of a powerless ant? Xiaoba flipped the dagger in his hand, and without even bothering to conceal his figure, he entered the plainly decorated woman's bedroom with loud footsteps. Yet the next moment, Xiaoba suddenly sensed the coldness of a hidden weapon directly shoot towards him. Not good. Xiaoba thought gloomily, and moving sideways, he dodged countless hidden weapons that swept over his cheek, but some still directly pierced his body. As the hidden weapons reached his body, Xiaoba discovered that they were silver needles, as thin as a strand of hair. When these needles touched his body, he found that they contained an icy spiritual power that made him, this Meridian stage martial artist's entire body, grow cold. However, Xiaoba simply didn't care about these small, lousy needles with weak, icy spiritual power. With this attack, though, it did arouse the bloodlust within his body. "Little girl, if you had just obediently died, I could have made it fast and painless. But since you want to resist, then you can taste my 18 cruel methods." Saying so, he gathered all his spiritual power, then rushed towards the girl hidden in the shadows. But soon, Xiaoba's expression changed to one of alarm. He was shocked to find that his dantian was being sealed by something, so he was unable to move the spiritual power in his body. Chapter 123, Beheaded in One Strike. You? Xiaoba opened his mouth to shout, but the little girl that had been hiding in the shadows suddenly disappeared. The next moment, Xiaoba felt a burst of sharp pain in his throat, and suddenly, blood was spewing from his neck. Opening his eyes wide in disbelief, he stared at the girl almost within reach before he quickly retreated. His eyes were filled with fright, unwillingness, and despair. Soon after, he slowly closed his eyes, his breathing ceasing. Beheaded in one strike. Hushi didn't pause, and quickly transferring all the internal power within her body to conceal her figure, she turned around and jumped out the window, escaping towards the depths of Tsang Mountain. In fact, Hushi's current strength could in no way compare to a group of assassins, let alone 3. She hadn't even had the confidence that she would win a one-on-one fight. Just a moment ago, if that assassin hadn't been so careless, or if he hadn't tried to use so much spiritual power after being hit by the invisible needles, he would have discovered that it was just a thin layer of internal power sealing his dantian. It wouldn't have been able to withstand even a single blow. Unfortunately, his first mistake was to seriously underestimate Hushi, and then, his second mistake was to lose his composure and become frightened by the invisible needles, becoming so terrified he had lost his ability to think. It was only then that Hushi had found the opportunity to kill him in one hit. In the yard, the remaining 3 assassins were still leisurely chatting, and even though they smelled the strong reek of blood, they didn't have the slightest worry. But as time went by, they started to realize that Xiaoba was taking a little too long to complete his task, and that there weren't any sounds of movement coming from the room. Puzzled, they walked to the room, and after barely opening the door, All three of the assassins' faces changed. They saw that the small room was covered in blood. It even flowed to the door while the stench of it permeated the room. Lying in the middle of a pool of blood was their younger brother, Xiaoba. His eyes were wide open, his face frightened, and his breathing had long since ceased. The leader looked at his younger brother's corpse, and his eyes bulged in anger. Grinding his teeth, he ruthlessly said, "Chase her. We must tear that smelly girl's body to shreds." The three assassins were extremely fast, so although Hushi had a head start and was using her qinggong, when facing martial artists using flying swords, she was still caught in the blink of an eye. The leader of the assassins halted in mid-air, and looking below at the lightning speed of Hushi, the corner of his mouth raised to reveal the trace of a cruel smile. To an ordinary person's eyes, Hushi's speed is extremely fast, nearly turning her into a shadow, but for 3 Meridian stage experts, this kind of speed is simply not worth mentioning. The leader raised his arm, and condensing his spiritual power into a dark red fireball on his hand, he wrapped it around the flying sword. Then, with one hand holding the sword hilt, he suddenly threw the sword. The fireball engulfed the flying sword in a flash, following it as it hurtled at lightning speed towards the fleeing Hushi. The assassins heard a loud bang, and the fireball scattered, turning the flying sword into fine powder. Yet the expected outcome of Hushi being torn apart into hundreds of pieces didn't occur. She instead stumbled 2 steps due to the heat of the explosion, yet without pausing she continued to dash forward, as if she wasn't affected by that attack in the slightest. In midair, the 3 assassins' faces showed their shock. One must know that the strike from the lead assassin a moment ago was equal to the strength of 10 people. His cultivation base is currently at the peak of Meridian stage, so even an expert on Gold Core stage would at least suffer a little damage from that strike. Yet how is that an ordinary person was able to walk away, seemingly unharmed? Chapter 124. Piercing the heart. So thinking about it, there is only one explanation. This girl's body possessed a treasure. Moreover, it must be a rank 5 or higher magical tool. The assassins looked at each other in dismay, greed evident in their expressions as they suddenly accelerated the speed of their flying swords to catch up to Hushi. While Hushi was fleeing, she touched her hair, and when she felt the remnants of a fine powder in her hand, her heart soared. Just a moment ago, it wasn't any sort of treasure that had blocked the assassin's attack. Rather, it was the imprint that Nangong Yu left on her body. It was only at a time when her life was at risk that the imprint would transform into a protective barrier, keeping her safe from harm. Nangong Yu. Seems like I already owe him too much. Unfortunately, though, it seems that today might be her funeral. She was afraid that perhaps she wouldn't have the opportunity to repay him in the future. This thought had just flashed through Hushi's mind, when before her eyes those assassins suddenly surrounded her. The leader's gaze was filled with fake kindness as he looked at her, yet he coldly said, "Nailin Hushi, if you hand over the treasure hidden on your body, I'll make your death less painful otherwise. Based on the hatred we have for you after you killed Xiaoba, we will certainly have you begging for death before we're through." Hushi slightly panted, her gaze cold as she studied the 3 people before her without the slightest trace of panic or fear. "Who ordered you to kill me?" Standing on the left side of the leader, one of the assassin's expressions abruptly twisted, and pulling out his long sword he shouted, "Smelly girl, still unwilling to shed tears without seeing a coffin. You even dare to adopt a high attitude with us when it's just you alone. Do you think you're a match for us?" Hushi's figure suddenly flashed as she disappeared from where she was originally standing, and with lightning speed due to her internal power, she rushed towards the assassin on the left. The assassin's face slightly changed, and condensing a thunderbolt on his palm, he fiercely threw it towards Hushi's chest. A crack could be heard, and Hushi felt a sharp scorching pain, causing all 4 of her limbs to spasm. But she didn't retreat. Instead, she continued forward. After being struck by the thunderbolt, her face showed a strange smile as she rushed towards him. The assassin on the left suddenly uttered an exclamation and slowly bowed his head. Looking down, he saw a slender dagger accurately stabbed into his abdomen, blood steadily seeping from the wound. Yet the frightening part is that when the blood made contact with the air, it suddenly turned a dark green color that could cause a person's hair to stand on end. Ah, pain, itchy. The assassin dropped his long sword and frantically scratched his body as he rolled around on the ground wailing. In the blink of an eye, his face was now badly mangled and dripping blood. Xiao Wu, what happening to you? The assassin on the right wanted to rush over and help him, but was stopped by the leader. Lao San, look clearly. Xiao Wu is highly poisonous right now. You will only suffer too if you go over to him. Saying so, his ruthless gaze fiercely stabbed towards Hushi like a sharp sword. Slut, what have you done to Xiao Wu? The side of Hushi's body was badly mangled and bleeding from being struck by the thunderbolt, and due to the pain, her complexion was deathly pale. Yet upon her mouth was an unscrupulous smile as she said, I placed a poison named Tearing Heart, Splitting Lung on the dagger I used. As soon as the poison enters the heart and arteries, the whole body will become unbearably painful and itchy. He only needs to shred his heart to stop the pain. As if confirming Hushi's words, that assassin called Xiao Wu all of a sudden released a long mournful hiss, hysterically howling, I can't stand it anymore. Following that, his body suddenly exploded, flesh and blood splattering everywhere. Chapter 125. Unwilling, the leader's forehead twitched as he looked at the flesh and blood that landed on his foot, thinking that there were a few pieces of shredded heart mixed in the gore. The other remaining assassin's eyes were full of alarm and resentment as he looked at Hushi. They didn't expect that although throughout the year they would be the ones attacking, suddenly, they were the ones being attacked. An insignificant ordinary person without a cultivation base had actually dared to mess with them, forcing the 4 expert Meridian stage martial artists into a tight corner. Not just Xiao Ba had lost his life. Now Xiao Wu had died miserably too. From this moment on, these 2 drought demon assassins' expressions were grave. They no longer dared to regard Hushi as an ordinary and weak woman. But from the bottom of Hushi's heart, a powerless and bitter laugh rose. In fact, her poisons were very difficult to deal with, but a martial artist's defense power is more difficult to deal with. Just recently with Xiao Wu, if she hadn't done the unexpected and risked her life by not avoiding the thunderbolt, then there would have been no way she could have caught him off guard and managed to insert the poisonous dagger into his dantian. If she had missed, the poison would have been unable to penetrate into his body, and his spiritual power would have naturally expelled it. Therefore, that was her last chance to fight back. There wouldn't be a second chance. Sure enough, the next moment the leader's figure abruptly disappeared, and when he reappeared, a long sword that emitted fire spiritual power was in his hand as he fiercely thrust it towards Hushi's body. Hushi felt a burning pain from her chest and abdomen as the long sword pierced her body, causing scarlet blood to pour to the ground. Her body slowly became limp, and she started to collapse, her eyes blurry. She could almost sense the vitality draining from her body bit by bit, while the Grim Reaper's sickle edged closer. Was she going to die? Just when she has started her new life, she is destined to quietly die in this wilderness. Unwilling. Really unwilling. She still hasn't become stronger. Her dantian still hasn't awakened. Still haven't repaid Nangongyu for helping her. How can she die like this? The lead assassin had a thought. Then the long sword that was stabbed into Hushi's body suddenly flew out, returning to his hand. The bloodstains on the long sword had evaporated due to the fire. However, Hushi's body was now completely limp, and she toppled to her knees onto the pool of blood at her feet. Until this moment, the 2 assassins hadn't been able to relax, and the assassin on the left released a sigh. She was really just an ordinary person, so she didn't have any ability to resist Big Brother's sword. Unfortunately, Xiao Wu and Xiao Ba fell to her tricks. The lead assassin that was called Big Brother walked forward, and towering above the dying Hushi, he looked at her with an arrogant expression, his eyes full of hatred. Then, with a stern voice he said, I said before, that since you dared to kill my younger brother, that I would certainly tear your body to shreds, leaving you to die without a burial place. So slut, go die. Holding the long sword covered in flames up high, he suddenly brought it down, aiming towards Hushi. The assassin on the left excitedly retreated 2 steps, shouting loudly, Chop off her 4 limbs first. Cut this swine apart. I would like to see what tricks she can play then. Seeing the long sword heading towards her, and knowing that she had no hope of survival this time, Hushi desperately closed her eyes and gently pinched the throat, sealing blood poison in her hand. Rather than meeting her demise by assassins, she would rather end her own life. However, just when Hushi was about to swallow the poison, an overwhelming amount of spiritual pressure abruptly fell from the sky. Hushi's body that was almost touched by the long sword was now like a kite with its string snapped. After swaying side to side, she then fell to the ground with a crash. The assassins who just a moment ago were shouting in excitement now felt the blood in their veins freeze. Due to the extreme fear of a strong martial artist, their whole bodies shivered, and with a pop, they landed on the ground in kneeling positions. Chapter 126, Drought Demon Organization, Hushi, Dash. A frightened and angry roar sounded at her ears, the voice so familiar yet so distant. Hushi was only half conscious, and as her body grew colder, she could feel that someone was holding her in their arms, gently removing the skin mask on her face. This person was slightly trembling as they embraced her in what felt like fear and regret, but so warm, so comforting. The corner of Hushi's mouth raised into a faint, gentle smile, before she then lost consciousness. Nangongyu hugged Hushi tightly. Examining her heavily injured body, he didn't dare believe his own eyes. The girl's features under the mask were still delicate and beautiful, but her complexion was deathly pale, nearly transparent. Her phoenix eyes that always captivated him were now dull, devoid of light, as if at any time she would disappear from this world. A few days ago he was listening to Baihu's report, eating her specially prepared foods, and imagining her proud and playful appearance. He has always been looking forward to the day he would be able to meet with her. The day he would be able to lift the seal on her dantian, letting her depend on him more so that they would be inseparable. However, when he awoke this morning, what was waiting for him? It was to an alert from the imprint he left on Hushi's body, letting him know that she was being attacked. After he hurriedly rushed over, what he found is her dying. Nangongyu's hands clenched tightly into fists, the light in his eyes scarlet flames that burned fiercely. At this moment, he was strongly trying to suppress a heaven-destroying, earth-extinguishing fury. He wanted to dismember the people who injured Hushi, crushing their bones to dust. "Xier, you'll be fine." Nangongyu gripped Hushi's hand, quickly transferring the pure essence of his spiritual power to her. "You have me here. I definitely won't let something happen to you." The transferring of spiritual power to Hushi helped her weak breathing slowly become stable, while the fatal wound in her chest and abdomen indicated some signs of healing. Once he was sure that Hushi's life wasn't in immediate danger, it was only then that Nangongyu raised his head, his scarlet eyes burning as he glared at the 2 assassins not far away. His icy voice contained a promise of deadly violence as he spoke. "Drought Demon Organization, very good. In this world, there have been very few people who have been able to provoke me to anger, and yet you've managed it. Hell King, you are. Your Highness Hell King." The leader saw the Hell King's evil demon-like smile, and suddenly his eyes opened wide as he released a horrified shout. "Isn't this the one who was called the #1 genius in Jinling Kingdom countless times the past few years?" And when he reached Gold Core stage, the 9th heaven's black thunder fell, that His Highness Hell King, the one who even the royal family of Jinling Kingdom are afraid of, with his strength massacring countless troops from magical beasts, dyeing the Guijin mountain range red, that His Highness Hell King, that one who was bestowed the name King of the Underworld, ruling over the life and death of the human world, controlling the 6 paths of reincarnation, completely ruthless when killing his enemies, that His Highness Hell King. The assassins sat blankly on the ground. Under Nangongyu's fierce gaze, their bodies began to tremble all over. Heavens! In the end, what sort of mission had the Drought Demon Organization received? This clearly unremarkable girl, without any good looks, how could the Hell King have taken a fancy to her? No one who provoked the Hell King had been able to survive intact. This is the day the assassins from Drought Demon Organization would be annihilated. Mercy! Hell King, please spare us. The cultivation base of the leader was too low, so he couldn't help but feel fear in his heart, and crawling to Nangong Yu's feet, he said in a trembling voice, "We only received a mission, and we accepted money from that person. So on behalf of that person, we were to kill her. We didn't really want to intentionally dispose of Miss Nayland. Please, Hell King, spare us assassins from Drought Demon Organization." Chapter 127. Annihilated Nangong Yu looked down at them with an indifferent expression, his bloodshot eyes covered with a layer of frost. "Speak. If you tell me who the mastermind is, I'll let the assassins from Drought Demon Organization off." That means that he really intends to destroy all of the assassins from Drought Demon Organization if they don't reveal anything. The hopeful expression on the leader's face crumpled, changing into one of utter despair. But when facing this excessively strong young man, he didn't have any courage to resist answering. We don't know who requested the mission. All the Drought Demon Organization deals with is receiving the mission from the black market. We just take the money without asking questions." Since this is the case, the corner of Nangong Yu's mouth raised into a cruel smile, "Then your existence is unnecessary." He had barely spoken when a bright ball of spiritual power suddenly formed on his slightly raised left hand. The assassin kneeling at Nangong Yu's feet screamed with fear, and he wanted to flee, but without being able to take even a single step, the ball of spiritual power ball wrapped itself around his body and that of the other assassin. Soon after, their bodies felt like there was something drilling into them, and the surface of their skin began to swell with uneven bumps. "Ah!" The assassins screamed in pain, and following that their bodies ripped apart, leaving only blood and bones splattered around. However, the ball of spiritual power hadn't finished its destruction yet, continuing to burn the blood and bones with a faint blue flame until it completely eroded everything, leaving nothing but ash. Only then did the spiritual fire slowly disappear without a trace. Nangong Yu glanced at the wind, spreading the ash of the two assassins into the air. Then, sneering, he held Hushi and rapidly flew back to Hell King Manor. Hell King Manor. Qinglong, Baihu, and Zhu Ke were standing at the gate. From time to time, they would look at the sky with worried expressions. Baihu incessantly muttered out of nervousness, "It's already reached this point, the time when Master's illness is about to flare. So why would he suddenly go out? Why has he still not returned?" At this moment, Zhu Ke, who was standing next to him, had her face covered with a veil, concealing that eye-catching scar. Hearing what was said, her eyes filled with worry. "Qinglong, do you know why Master went out today, leaving his closed-door cultivation early? It was to lift the seal on Shiyu, the genius Dr. Shi's Dantian." Of course, Qinglong knew what his master went out to do, and he extremely disagreed with it. But Master is the master, and as long as he is commanded not to say anything, even if Qinglong was anxious, he would never speak without permission. He has always been quiet from the beginning, refusing to answer any questions, so Baihu and Zhu Ke weren't surprised. However, as Qinglong looked at the sky for a long while, a gloomy expression covered his face and he opened his mouth to say, "Baihu, Zhu Ke, if someone's existence will harm Master, but Master wouldn't hesitate to protect him, what would you do?" Baihu answered, "Of course Master's will is the priority." While Zhu Ke answered, "Of course the cheap person who will threaten Master must be killed." The two people almost responded in unison, and after they finished speaking they looked at each other in dismay, each with a complicated expression on their face. Even Qinglong's eyebrows were creased, his face twisted. Just then, Qinglong's expression lit up, and he shouted with a low voice, "Master's returned." The next moment, Nangong Yu descended from the sky with his robes floating around him, landing by Hell King Manor's big gate. Qinglong was just about to come forward, wanting to follow, when suddenly he looked at the bloody figure in Master's arms, his eyes opening wide. "Master, is this genius Dr. Shi?" Chapter 128. Closed door. Healing Hushi's appearance at this time was still bright, elegant, and exquisite, but because her disguise was removed, coupled with her hair loose and blowing in the wind, With just a glance, Qing Long was able to see that this is genius Dr. Shi, and that she is a girl. Moreover, her appearance is so devastatingly beautiful that it is capable of causing the downfall of a city. It was even more impressive when you factored in that she is only a young girl, yet has peerless medical expertise. Qing Long sucked in a gulp of cold air. He was always calm and collected, yet couldn't help but blurt out, "Genius Doctor, she is a woman?" It's no wonder then. No wonder that Master cared about and cherished her so much. No wonder that on the carriage Master was like that with her. Standing on the side, Zhu Ke was also able to recognize Hushi's identity with just a glance. Yet when she noticed that Hushi's sallow and ugly face has now become so beautiful, both her hands clenched tightly, while her heart raged the words, "Impossible, impossible," repeatedly. This abominable slut. First, she destroyed her appearance, making her ashamed to appear in front of Master. Now she exposed a delicate, pitiful, and charming fox-like appearance to seduce Master. So shameless. It's simply too shameless. Zhu Ke's eyes reddened, and firmly glaring at the unconscious Hushi, she was unaware that the veil on her face had slipped off. She wanted to rush over and tear that face apart, pull her out from Nangong Yu's arms and ruthlessly throw her to the ground. The hate born out of jealousy in her heart was like a burning flame, causing the scar on her face to constantly twist. Resembling a centipede crawling on her beautiful face, it made her features look distorted and hideous. Yet why would Nangong Yu care about the reactions of his subordinates at this time? Glancing at the girl in his arms whose breathing was gradually growing weaker, his eyes darkened as he coldly said, "I will heal she air behind closed doors, prepare the best medicinal pills and send them in. Qing Long, you guard the door. Without my order no one is allowed to enter." Qing Long always obeyed Nangong Yu's orders, yet when he heard what he said his heart thumped loudly, and looking at Hushi he murmured, "Master, it's time for you to." Nangong Yu's icy gaze sharply swept over Qing Long, instantly silencing him. His eyebrows creased as he followed behind Nangong Yu. Yet Zhu Ke was finally unable to bear it any longer and rushed over, landed to her knees with plop in front of Nangong Yu, and cried as she said, "Master, you are now at the moment between life and death. You absolutely cannot harm your body for an insignificant person. If Master wants to save Miss Nayland, you may hand her over to this subordinate. This subordinate is a 5th-ranked doctor. I'll certainly be able to heal Miss Nayland's injury." "That's right, Master." Even Bai, who could no longer endure it, and said, "Genius. Miss Nayland seems to have only suffered superficial wounds, and Zhu Ke's medical expertise is excellent, so there'll definitely be no problem for her to treat her injury. Master, you should quickly return to closed-door cultivation, otherwise, other people may not have realized, but they were trusted subordinates. They were able to clearly detect that Nangong Yu's originally fair skin had now become more transparent, and that the blood flow in his body had also begun to slow, causing his hands and feet to gradually turn cold. While it looked like nothing judging by the Master's appearance, in truth, his body is suffering from great pain. Nangong Yu didn't even look at Zhu Ke as he sneeringly said, "My matters are not for all of you to decide. Qing Long, don't make me order you a second time." "Master!" Zhu Ke exclaimed, but when she raised her head again, she didn't see Master's figure anymore. Nangong Yu's bedroom was restricted in Hell King manner, so as the bedroom door firmly closed, Qing Long took up a position outside the door to guard it, his face cold and calm. Chapter 129. Cold blood. Zhu Ke bitterly glared at him, her voice piercing to their ears. "Qing Long, what are you doing? Do you want to let that slut kill Master? Quickly get out of the way. Let me go in to save Master." Qing Long's face was expressionless as he faintly said, "Master's orders. Regardless of whether it's wrong or not, I refuse to disobey." No matter how much Zhu Ke insulted or screamed, Qing Long remained completely unmoved. His cultivation base is the highest amongst them, so although they're all gold core stage martial artists, even if Zhu Ke and Bai Hu joined together to fight him, they wouldn't necessarily win. Thus, the people outside the bedroom door were deadlocked. Inside the bedroom, Nangong Yu carefully placed Hushi on his bed. He is a person with mysophobia, so apart from a servant boy being allowed to come and sweep this bedroom, No one else is allowed to enter. For him, his bed is his to personally use. Nobody has permission to touch it. But now, seeing Hushy's blood dye his bed red, he didn't feel the slightest bit of disgust. All he felt was panic and distress. His she-heir should be willful, arrogant, and cold. She shouldn't be like she is now, dying and looking like she will disappear at any time. Nangong Yu very carefully untied Hushy's outer clothes, and grabbing the medicine that Qing Long brought in a moment ago, he sprinkled it over her horrific wound. The medicine in Hell King Manor is naturally all high grade, so as soon as the following medicine made contact with her flesh, whether it is an injury caused by a sword or a wound from being struck by thunder, the speed of healing could clearly be seen by the naked eye. However, when all the wounds were healed, Hushy's breathing was still growing weaker, her pale face expressionless. Nangong Yu held her icy body in his embrace, fear bubbling up in his heart. This is the first time since birth that he has experienced such feelings. Fear, panic, terrified that the girl in his arms will leave him, and from then on he will no longer be able to see or touch her. He pondered for a moment, and finally made a firm resolution. From the storage ring on his finger, he withdrew a simple and unadorned jade box. Opening the jade box, a scorching heat wave assaulted his senses. It was the yuan yang fruit that Hushy gave to Nangong Yu. Compared to 1 month ago, the yuan yang fruit is still hot. Yet the fierce heat from the yang has become milder, purer. Furthermore, any impurities harmful to the human body have vanished. This is the result of Nangong Yu using his own body temperature and continuously cooling it down for a month. Unfortunately, that is not enough. Even if the yang of the yuan yang fruit has been refined, Hushy's weak and ordinary body will still be burned by the heat once she consumes the yuan yang fruit. Therefore, she would need an object to act as a guide and neutralize the heat before she could use the yuan yang fruit. Nangong Yu wrapped the yuan yang fruit in his spiritual power, and pinching Hushy's chin, he slowly placed the yuan yang fruit into her mouth. Once the yuan yang fruit entered her body, Hushy suddenly groaned, her pale complexion abruptly changing into a scorching red color. Soon, that fiery blaze spread from her dantian, burning through her meridians and skin, burning her to what felt like ashes. Nangong Yu suddenly bowed his head, deeply kissing those bright red lips. Lips and teeth intertwined, body fluids mixed, and gradually the trace of blood flowed between the mouths of the two people touching, slowly running down Hushy's fair and translucent collarbone. Lost in unconsciousness, Hushy could only feel her whole body burning. Every vein in her body, every meridian, it all felt like it was being burnt by hot oil. Chapter 130, Blood Contract. Next, this kind of heat slowly permeated to her bones, roasting her, burning her, as if at any time she would be burnt to ashes. A painful groan was released from Hushy's mouth, her eyebrows frowning tightly as the intense pain made her whole body begin to spasm and struggle, her throat almost unable to hold back a shrill scream. Just when it became unbearable, there was a sudden flow of icy liquid. It passed through her lips, glided down her throat, and entered her internal organs, in a flash spreading throughout her entire body. So comfortable, so refreshing. I want more. Hushy couldn't help but let out a pleased sigh, her hands instinctively extending to hold on to something. Her mouth released a hoarse groan. Then her lips used their full strength to suck harder, so as to be able to absorb more of the icy liquid. The next moment, Hushy felt whatever was embracing her suddenly tighten, as if it wanted to merge with her body. The soft lips pressing against hers abruptly hardened, speeding up with passion, as if they were trying to conquer her mouth. The icy liquid slowly infiltrated her body, making the blood in her veins heat up. But this kind of heat didn't cause her pain. Instead, it made her cling harder as she lost herself to the comfort she was feeling. Indulging in their fiery passion, Hushy and Nangong Yu hadn't yet realized that along with the Yang's spiritual power being neutralized by the Yin blood, the essence of the Yuan Yang fruit began to slowly be absorbed by Hushy's dantian. Hushy's dried-up dantian that had been oddly sealed firmly had now become a huge spiritual power vortex. The whirlpool steadily grew larger, picking up speed. Suddenly, A glaring white light burst from Hushi's body, soon after spreading throughout the vast world. As Qinglong stood guard outside the iron gate, with Zhu Ke and Bai Hu standing opposite him, the faint smell of blood leaked out from the crack under the gate. Abruptly, their expressions changed. The spiritual power within the three people's bodies burst forth, while the blood essence in their chests surged forward, as if it wanted to fly into the room. Zhu Ke's face distorted once again, and hissing she said, "It's Master. Master's using his blood essence to treat that slut." They all have a permanent master-servant contract with the Hell King. It wouldn't matter whether their master's chi energy was weak or strong, or if they were thousands of miles apart, they would still be able to sense him. A martial artist's blood essence, one, also known as heart blood, represented their life. If Master gave his blood essence to Hushi, he would be dividing his own life and chi energy, giving half to her. The three people's expressions become extremely unsightly, and when they looked towards the tightly closed gate, their eyes filled with anxiousness and anger. Zhu Ke rushed to Qinglong, screaming, "Qinglong, do you know what it means for Master to lose some of his blood essence now? It's almost time for his illness to show up. If Master does this again, he'll be unable to survive. Do you still want to block us? Are you still not letting me go in to kill that slut?" Qinglong's face showed his internal struggle. His expression was of one experiencing pain. While the veins on his hand that was holding a sword bulged, his joints cracking. Zhu Ke still wanted to say more, when suddenly, several figures quickly descended from the sky. Without waiting to properly land and gain their balance, the people immediately rushed over to the three people standing by the gate and shouted, "We sensed Master's chi dwindling and our blood contracts flared. What has happened to Master?" The people that had arrived were several other contract servants under Nangongyu that had been away from Yinjing City recently. Xian Wu Tu, Wu Xian, and Wu Yu. Once Zhu Ke saw Wu Xian and Wu Yu, she immediately couldn't help but start crying, "Big brother Wu Xian, big brother Wu Yu. Master is inside currently using his own blood essence to save an ordinary woman. But it's soon time for Master's illness to show up. If he's not stopped and treated, I'm really afraid Master, one, blood essence, also known as heart blood, is basically lifeblood or life force. Powerful techniques sometimes require cultivators to expend their essence, shortening their lifespan as a result." 2. Xin Wu equals Black Tortoise. He is the fourth mythological named character, joining Zhu Ke, Vermilion Bird/Phoenix, Qinglong, Azure Dragon, and Bai Hu, White Tiger. Chapter 131. Spiritual Power Vortex. Wu Xian's cold eyes flashed with a deep killing intent, and stepping forward in large strides, he wanted to rush into Nangongyu's bedroom. However, Qinglong stepped forward to block him. Master has commanded that without his order, no one is allowed to enter. Wu Xian's sharp gaze landed on Qinglong as he coldly said, "Qinglong, do you think you can stop me? Moreover, don't forget that our first priority is to ensure Master's safety." He had barely finished speaking when his eyes flashed with a cold light, while a fierce amount of spiritual pressure was released from his body. Qinglong dodged too late, the jolt from the spiritual pressure pushing him back several steps. His complexion became somewhat pale and unsightly. Qinglong, Bai Hu, Zhu Ke, and Xian Wu were each given a codename after one of the four divine beasts. To the public, they are known as Nangongyu's personal bodyguards. Unknown to most, though, is that Nangongyu had four other guards that he had secretly trained. They were given codenames after the four ferocious beasts, Wu Xian, Wu Yu, Wu Nian, and Wu Go. They were guards trained to offer their life for their master, no matter the danger to themselves. All 8 people were experts in their respective fields, each a leader in charge of their own force. However, as teams, Qinglong is the leader of the 4 great divine beasts, with Wu Xian the leader of the 4 great ferocious beasts. Wu Xian's team was slightly stronger than Qinglong's team. After Wu Xian pushed Qinglong aside, he focused his spiritual power in his palm, using it to open the iron gate leading into Nangongyu's courtyard. The iron gate had just opened, when before anyone could enter the courtyard, they were abruptly blinded by a bright flash of white light. Next, It was like a sudden gale started in the courtyard, causing the leaves on the ground to scatter in the air. These sudden storm clouds seemed like a foreshadowing of trouble ahead. Wu Xian's complexion changed, and rushing to stand in front of Nangong Yu's bedroom door, he roughly pushed it open. However, as soon as Wu Xian and the others entered the room, their expressions stiffened as they blankly stared at the curtain in front of them. The curtain hung from the bed and fluttered in the cool breeze, along with the tassels and clothes surrounding it. Behind the lightly fluttering curtain, alternately hidden from view and then visible, Nangongyu and Hushi were tightly embracing each other. With their lips plastered together, it was difficult to distinguish their expressions. The corner Wu Xian's mouth twitched, along with everyone else's. Awkwardly shuffling their feet, they didn't know what to do with their hands or where to look. This is the first time that they had ever seen their cold-hearted master display such unbridled passion. He was always emotionless, yet now he is behaving like he is intoxicated. However, before Wu Xian and the others could return to their senses, a vortex could suddenly be seen by the naked eye, slowly forming between the two people. The vortex spun, first absorbing the spiritual power in the room, and gradually accelerating its speed as it slowly expanded. Once it shrouded Wu Xian and the others, it then spread outside the room. As Wu Xian stood absent-minded, he unexpectedly felt a great invisible force start to suction out the spiritual power from within his body. What's going on here? How could this be? With shock written across everyone's faces, they hurriedly set up protective barriers around their bodies, capable of resisting that suction. Fortunately, after they set up the protective barriers around their bodies, the suction disappeared without a trace. No, more precisely, the suction bypassed them, following the vortex to spread out to surrounding areas. Wu Xian gazed towards the delicate and slender girl on the bed, his eyes showing bewilderment. Is this strange vortex created by this woman? Was this why Master insisted on risking his life to save her? In the end, just who is she? Slut, why with Master? Get off him. Go die. A shrill scream suddenly reached their ears. Wu Xian and the others turned their heads, only to find Zhu Ke looking insane as she rushed towards the two intimate people on the bed. Chapter 132. Unlucky Zhu Ke. As Zhu Ke stood there, the huge vortex hovered over her, and little by little, it suctioned out many years' worth of her accumulated spiritual power that she had cultivated. Her complexion aged and withered at a speed naked to the eye, yet she was completely unaware of it. Zhu Ke's entire body trembled as she became devoid of rationality, and she rushed towards Hushi in the center of the vortex. It is unknown when, but she was now holding a dagger, the tip shining a strange blue-green. Obviously, it is smeared with something highly poisonous. A crazy smile was plastered across Zhu Ke's lips. Even if she had to risk her cultivation base, she must kill this woman. She must get revenge of the hatred due to her disfigurement. Furthermore, she will not let this slut snatch Master away. Zhu Ke, you can't. Qing Long and the others exclaimed, their complexions suddenly changing. However, it was too late, the sharp dagger blurring as it was fiercely stabbed towards Hushi. But the expected eruption of blood didn't happen. On the contrary, Zhu Ke, who had rushed over, screamed, and with her body resembling a kite flying off after its string is broken, she flew around the room, finally crashing into a wall. She spit out a mouthful of blood, denial and hatred in her eyes as she glanced at Hushi, then fainted with disappointment written across her features. Bai Hu looked at her worriedly, whispering, Zhu Ke didn't form a protective barrier over herself before she fainted. Her cultivation base, humph. She valued her jealousy more than Master's safety. She reaps what she sowed. Wu Xian's cold and pitiless words instantly dispelled Bai Hu's intention of helping Zhu Quebec. Just at this moment, Nangongyu suddenly opened his eyes in the center of the vortex. He first thoroughly examined Hushi's body using his spiritual power to make sure she wasn't in any danger. Then, his cold dark eyes swept around the room, finally landing on several of his subordinates outside the door. Wu Xian and the others felt their bodies quiver all over under the gaze of those cruel, icy red eyes, to the point that they were almost unable to maintain their protective barriers. Nangong Yu coldly snorted, then said in a low voice, "No next time. Whoever dares to violate my orders in the future, don't even bother to appear in front of me again." As he finished speaking, he waved his hand, and the door that was knocked open by Wu Excian closed in a flash, firmly sealed with a spiritual power enchantment. Wu Excian gasped for breath, his face sagging into an expression of relief after the terror he had felt. Just a moment ago, Master's expression when he had looked at him was really too frightening. Wu Yu frowned while muttering next to him, "It's close to the time for Master's illness to show up. If Master is like this now, what will happen to him later? Will he be okay?" They all looked at each other in dismay, sinking into a depressed silence. At this time, everyone worrying in the courtyard of Hell King Manor wouldn't know, but that vortex which had first only affected the 6 of them had now swept throughout Yanjing City. Apart from Nangongyu, no one knew that in the center of this vortex, the seal on Hushi's Dantian is gradually lifting. At this moment, Hushi's Dantian resembled a dissatisfied and greedy black hole. Countless amounts of spiritual energy was being sucked in, but when the spiritual energy was completely absorbed, it was still unsatisfied. The vortex continued to expand, and the fierce wind began to strengthen abruptly, causing dust and sand to fly everywhere. While the spiritual energy that was drawn into the vortex, regardless of whether it was from the air or the vegetation, was completely absorbed. Demonic beasts in the forest rampaged, their bodies all emitting a harsh light as they resisted their spiritual energy being absorbed with all their strength. In the sky of Yanjing City, martial artists riding on flying swords suddenly felt the swords under their feet start buzzing, and no longer able to transfer their spiritual power, they fell down from the sky one by one. Fortunately, every martial artist that is able to fly possessed a magical tool that would protect their body and save their life, so they were luckily able to escape from an ending of becoming a meat patty. Chapter 133, Demon Day and Night in Yanjing City. For anyone that is a cultivator, when they tried to absorb spiritual power, they discovered that not only were they unable to absorb any, but instead, an invisible force was extracting the spiritual power within their bodies. All the martial artists turned pale with fright, and immediately, they took out all kinds of spiritual talismans and magical tools to resist this powerful suction. However, this force was much larger than they expected. So other than martial artists at Gold Core stage or higher who were able to form protective barriers, the rest of the martial artists, no matter how powerful a magical item they used, they couldn't stop the spiritual power dissipating within their bodies. At this time in Yanjing City, alleyways that are normally silent as soon as the sun set were instead in chaos. Even the older generations from large influential families that were in closed-door cultivation were alarmed, having come out earlier. Every major family, including Jean Ling's royal family, all sent out troops to inquire and investigate the source of why they were unable to use their spiritual power. Unfortunately, since all the martial artists were unable to use their full strength, they naturally couldn't find the source of this weird phenomenon. Suddenly, the absorption of spiritual power sped up, and in the sky above Yanjing City, there appeared a huge white vortex, visible to the naked eye. The vortex rotated faster and faster, while its size grew larger and larger. Hovering above Yanjing City, it resembled a white sun, lighting up the entire city. Heavens! What's that? Is this vortex absorbing our spiritual power? In the end, what is this? All the martial artists in Yanjing City rushed outside to look at the glaring white vortex. Suddenly, someone shouted out, "Demon Day and Night has arrived. This is the beginning of the Demon Day and Night." Once these words were said, all the martial artists burst out in a huge uproar, horror expressed on everyone's faces. Demon Day and Night. Could this really be the world's biggest calamity? Demon Day and Night? Doesn't that mean the big calamity will soon descend upon me Luo continent? In the distance, a man with the appearance of an evildoer, with long and narrow phoenix eyes, was at this moment standing on the summit of a mountain, looking at the white light in the distant east that was just like a scorching sun. The corner of his mouth raised into a brilliant smile. After waiting for so long, finally. Has it finally appeared? At this point, in the center of the vortex, Hushi wasn't the slightest bit aware that she had caused something strange. Currently unconscious, her originally dried up and empty dantian was little by little being filled. The meridians throughout her body were being nourished by the pure essence of spiritual power, and after circulating around her body 12 times, it then returned to her dantian. The last seal that remained on her dantian had now been destroyed, eroding away with the pure spiritual power, causing Hushi's cultivation base to rapidly increase in stages. Early stage of Qi refining, middle stage of Qi refining, peak of Qi refining. Nangongyu slightly raised an eyebrow as he watched the cultivation base of the girl in his arms rising. Slowly it broke through to the Qi refining stage, and from the Qi refining stage, in a flash it rose to the advanced rank of the foundation establishment stage. Yet despite this, the growth of her cultivation base still didn't stop. Such a frightening advancing speed. If other martial artists were to see it, they would certainly be scared to the point that their eyes would fall from their sockets. Nangongyu bowed his head, kissing the girl's warm and soft, rose-petal lips. So although the blood within his body had begun to freeze, causing his body to tremble in pain, while his skin is pale and transparent, seeming as if it will crack at any time, his lips still formed a gentle and soft smile. At the same time, Hushi's space was also undergoing earth-shaking changes. Chapter 134, High-Rank Foundation Establishment Stage. The bottom of the 9th secluded spirit spring boiled. A vortex hovered above ancient Rhyme's spiritual field, and a click could be heard from every door in Shumi Palace. And inside Shumi Palace, inside one of the empty rooms, the constantly leaping light within the huge egg suddenly froze. Cracks now started to appear across its formerly smooth surface, as if something was about to break out of it. Warm sunshine shone in from outside, illuminating Hushi's body. The speck of golden light flickered across her beautiful and delicate face, resembling a naughty spirit, causing her to wake. With her long eyelashes slightly trembling, Hushi frowned as she slowly opened her eyes. Just as she was about to move her body, she suddenly released a pained groan. Her whole body felt like it had been crushed by elephants running over it. The ache was unbearable, especially the meridians within her body. They felt like they had been pulled by something. Even moving one finger was painful. Hushi took a deep breath, wanting to soothe her body by running her internal energy through it. Yet, unexpectedly, her dantian slightly responded as well. There was the pure essence of spiritual power overflowing from her dantian, and in a flash, it spread to the meridians throughout her body. Under the nourishment from the spiritual power circulating, the pain in her meridians slowly soothed, gradually helping her limbs to become more flexible. The feeling resembled a whole body massage, and Hushi couldn't help but sigh due to the comfortableness of it. Suddenly, her expression changed and she abruptly sat up. With the spiritual power in her dantian working, and using the awareness of divine sense, 1. To be able to see clearly, she could watch the spiritual power slowly wandering about in her meridians. When the spiritual power reached the meridian running to her hand, Hushi's mind focused, and in the next moment, a multicolored ball of light formed on her palm. Shocked, she lost her focus, and the multicolored ball of light instantly disappeared. How could this be? Her dantian is unsealed? Moreover, the spiritual power within her dantian had raised her cultivation base to at least 9th rank of the foundation establishment stage. Her memories from before she lost consciousness slowly overflowed, and she remembered that she was being chased by several Meridian stage assassins who wanted to kill her, so she had fled into Tsang Mountain. Although she had tried every method to deal with them, even managing to kill 2 of them, in the end, there was still a gap in their strength and hers, and the enemy had stabbed her through the chest and abdomen with a sword. Yet now her body wasn't injured, while her skin was even more exquisite and translucent than before. Even the white whip scars marring her skin had completely disappeared. So is she really completely awake? Furthermore, in such a short while she had managed to jump over the Qi refining stage, landing on a high rank of the foundation establishment stage. Hushi's heart filled with joy. After transmigrating, her strength had been too weak, and she had had no way to advance as her dantian was sealed, so all along she was anxious. The Majestic by Wuchang too, the organization's youngest gold medal killer since the beginning of history, had unexpectedly fallen to the point of being called trash in a different world. Now that she had finally broken her shackles and advanced to the Foundation establishment stage in such a short while, how could she not be happy? One must know that apart from here, the prodigy-filled Hell King Manor, that throughout all of Yinjing City there is only a few Meridian stage martial artists. While it was possible to count the amount of gold core stage martial artists with only 10 fingers, in her memories, Nalan Feishue was called a talented martial artist because it had only taken her 2 years to reach the early stages of the Foundation establishment stage. Hushi laughed lightly. She couldn't help but spread her palm out once again, and very soon, another multicolored ball of light filled with spiritual power appeared on her palm. Focusing her mind, she subtly controlled the spiritual power, and without much effort that multicolored ball of light turned red, representing the fire element. Hushi's eyes shone, and the red-colored ball of spiritual power soon became blue, representing the water element. 1. Divine Sense, an ability possessed by cultivators to scan their surroundings, far beyond the limits of their ordinary 5 senses, with their spirit. The total area they can scan corresponds to the strength of their spirit. 2. By Wuchang, White Impermanence, Hushi's assassin name from her past life. Chapter 135. Soft and White Meatball. According to her thoughts, she was unexpectedly able to change the ball of spiritual power into 5 different colors, as well as combine them. However, don't common martial artists only have a single white color to represent their spiritual power? Even double attribute spiritual roots display a milky white color. Furthermore, the more spiritual roots a person has, and the more spiritual power they use, the white ball of light would appear dusky, like a muddy moon. Suddenly, a young and tender child's voice sounded in Hushi's mind. Silly mother. This is because mother's cultivation is the 5 elements of spiritual power. So of course there are 5 different colors. Hushi was surprised at first. Then she realized that this familiar child's voice belonged to Dandan. But didn't Dandan say that when she was outside her space, they would be unable to communicate? Yet now she could clearly hear Dandan's voice from inside her space. So didn't that mean that Dandan had also risen in rank? Hushi's heart pounded, and in a flash her consciousness entered her space. Once she entered her space, Hushi felt that the spiritual energy was now more than 10 times richer than it previously was as it assaulted her senses. Before she had a chance to look around at the changes in her space, though, she suddenly felt something round run into her arms with a thump. Hushi staggered back several steps, before she then steadied herself with difficulty, raising the small thing in her arms in front of her eyes. This is a smooth, soft, and white meatball, or jelly to be more precise. Touching it feels really good. It was cool, soft, and its color resembled silky milk. Anyone who looked at it will crave to swallow it. On top of the meatball is a small round head, and on its small head it didn't have hair, but 2 slender antennae. At this moment that small head was slightly tilted, its antennae gently swaying, while a pair of big, watery, jet-black eyes occupied half of its face, staring with a fixed gaze at Hushi. For short, small, and fat lotus root-like limbs incessantly moved, and a pitiful protest came out from its mouth. Mother, mother, Dandan feels uncomfortable when you carry me like this. Mother, Dandan wants to be hugged. Those big black eyes blinked, brimming with childlike admiration and longing as they looked at Hushi. So although Hushi has a cold and emotionless heart, when being looked at by these adorable eyes, of course her heart would be moved. She blinked and asked, "You're Dandan?" Dandan nodded. Suddenly it struggled to free itself from Hushi's raised hands, and with one jump, it hung itself around Hushi's neck. Mother, I'm Dandan. Dandan missed you so much. Feeling its soft and jelly-like texture touch her face and rub lightly, acting like a spoiled child who would throw a tantrum, Hushi simply didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She grabbed it from her neck, but this time adjusted the way she held it so it could be comfortable. Looking at its plump body, she frowned. How come you're so fat? Letting you eat, and eat every day. Now look. Now you've turned into a rolling ball. Dandan heard this and immediately started crying. Dandan not fat. Dandan's originally like this. Mother dislikes me, wah. All right. Dandan's the cutest. Dandan's the slimmest. Mother doesn't dislike you. Will this do? Hushi appeased it for half a day, and only then did the overly sensitive, spoilt, spiritual pet feel good. She recalled its words from just a moment ago and asked, "What did you mean when you said the 5 elements of spiritual power?" 5 elements of spiritual power. Wasn't it 5 spiritual roots? The 5 spiritual roots in a cultivation world were known as useless spiritual roots, and that was practically what her previously crippled Dantian was. But it seemed that when referring to her spiritual power, it wasn't the same. Chapter 136. Promoted Space. Dandan bit a finger, blinking its big eyes as it looked at Hushi. The 5 elements of spiritual power are metal, wood, water, fire, and earth. 5 types of spiritual power. Mother, you don't even know about this? Hushi held her forehead. She shouldn't have had hope for Dandan's IQ. Moreover, this guy obviously didn't know anything, yet it had an expression on its face that showed it thought she was stupid. Fine. I'll just ignore you. We'll see whether you'll be able to be good or not. Hushi no longer paid any attention to this little imp, and turning her head, she began to examine the changes in her space. That's right, after only one night, Hushi had not only lifted the seal on her Dantian, promoting to foundation establishment stage, but Dandan had hatched from its egg, while her space had also experienced a big change. Originally vast, the ancient rhyme's spiritual field now expanded further away than the naked eye could see, and the spiritual herbs that grew in her space had all matured in one night. One must know that in Luo continent, spiritual herbs are graded by years. For example, the growth period for a first-grade spiritual herb is 10 years. For a second-grade spiritual herb, it's 100 years. For a third-grade spiritual herb, it's 1,000 years. For a fourth-grade spiritual herb, it's 5,000 years. And for a fifth-grade spiritual herb, it's 10,000 years. It's very difficult to find spiritual herbs that are 5th grade and higher, and it's not so easy to distinguish how old they are. Originally, the ancient rhyme's spiritual field could accelerate a plant's growth period 100-fold, but for first or second-grade spiritual herbs to grow into third-grade spiritual herbs, it still requires a long process. Yet now, in only one night, several stalks of third-grade spiritual herbs had matured. What made Hushi even more amazed is that a portion of first-grade spiritual plants in her space had unexpectedly advanced to second-grade spiritual plants. In Luo continent, this kind of situation was unheard of. Hushi quickly walked to the 9th secluded spirit spring, noticing that from its outward appearance, nothing had changed in the spirit spring. But when she cupped her hands to try and drink a mouthful, she felt that compared to its previous rich spiritual energy, it had now increased several times in such a short while, nourishing the 5 viscera and 6 bowels in her body. With such potent spiritual power infusing her meridians, not only did she not feel pain, instead, she was so comfortable she released a sigh. It seems that even the 9th secluded spirit spring has promoted. Hushi was pleased and noticed Dandan imitating her by leaning on the side of spirit spring, its small head stretching over to drink a mouthful of spring water. Yet after drinking just 2 mouthfuls, it suddenly raised its body, flinging the water off its head, and said with a deflated expression, "No taste? It's not tasty at all." Hushi was amused by Dandan's small appearance, despising the water. She then discovered that since the spiritual plants in her space had matured, and that the spiritual energy is so rich, Dandan is no longer interested. Even the 9th secluded spirit spring is actually being despised by him. You're a little guy that doesn't know what's good. Before, as long as it contains spiritual energy, wouldn't you happily eat it all? Now that you've grown up, you've actually learned to be picky about food. Dandan hugged Hushi's arm, its body hanging off her as it acted like a spoiled child, and said, "Mother makes the best foods to eat. Dandan could eat it for a lifetime and will never dislike it. Mother, Dandan hungry, so hungry. I want to eat Mother's tasty roast chicken, cake, and rabbit meat." Black lines appeared on Hushi's forehead. She felt that this little guy did nothing but eat when it was in the egg, and now that it's hatched, it's become a picky eater. In the future, will it keep eating till she becomes a pauper? Hushi didn't know, but ever since Dandan had been eating the spiritual foods that she made, its appetite had begun to be wicked, as previously Dandan had no way to refuse it if it wanted to break out of its shell. But after hatching, it has a human sense of taste and aesthetics, leading it to begin avoiding things with spiritual energy but no taste. Of course, if the spiritual energy is rich to a certain extent, Dandan will still ignore the taste and drool. Chapter 137. Spirit Firmament Palace. However, thinking about it now, Hushi herself is also hungry. Just before she was chased by the assassins, she had made a lot of food and placed it safely in a room in Shumi Palace, specifically finding a cabinet to organize and store different foods. Remembering it now made her salivate. One must know that the time in Shumi Palace has practically stopped, so the food stored inside, no matter how long it is left there, is still exactly the same as when it was stored. So when it's removed, even the steam wouldn't have dissipated. Arriving at the front of Shumi Palace, Hushi was surprised to discover that even Shumi Palace has gone through some strange changes. Shumi Palace has 81 doors, and in total there are 9 palaces all grouped together, 9 doors to every palace. Yet because most of the doors were closed, Hushi was unable to see what was inside them. Therefore, up until now Hushi had only known what the first palace is called, the Spirit Firmament Palace. The only door open there was the first room where Dandan was placed. But now, after her space had promoted, the originally locked 8 doors had unexpectedly disappeared. There was now only one door remaining with the words Spirit Firmament Door on top of it, and at this moment it was closed. Hushi slowly pushed the door open, and in a flash, her mind was suddenly filled with vague information. 9th Palace in Heaven. This is Spirit Firmament. All living things are for thou to use. The door completely opened, and the first thing Hushi saw is 8 jade boxes floating in the air, surrounded by flickering white light. The shape of these jade boxes is quite ordinary, and on the jade boxes a simple totem is carved. Hushi felt that she had seen this totem somewhere before. Each jade box is surrounded by a milky white, close to transparent light, and the jade boxes floated around the room on this light, like mischievous imps. Hushi reached out her hand to catch them, yet they darted away before she could even grab one. Her eyes were following one of the jade boxes when her gaze fell to the left corner of the room, and suddenly she was so shocked she nearly jumped. She saw an extremely familiar storage rack, and arranged on it had been her cooking tools, etc. Clearly the Spirit Firmament Door was Dandan's former location. But now, that corner is in a mess. The small doors on the storage rack were open, empty bowls and plates were piled in a heap, while there were several chewed bones thrown to the ground. Veins appeared on Hushi's forehead, and turning around, she saw Dandan duck its small head. With the appearance of a guilty conscience, it secretly tried to slip away, immediately letting Hushi know who the culprit is. She extended out her hand, grabbed its neck, and lifted it before her eyes, darkly asking, "Dandan, did you eat these things?" Dandan ducked its small head again, pitifully replying, "Mother, I was hungry. When I climbed out of the egg hungry. So I eat." The corner of Hushi's mouth twitched. This cabinet was full of food. "You've eaten so much, yet you still dare to shout at me that you're hungry?" Her braised moon chicken, roasted cloud rabbit, preserved porcupine leg, 2 full storage racks of food. She spent a lot of crystal stones to buy the ingredients, and little by little built up a stockpile, yet unexpectedly, it was all finished overnight. Moreover, when she looked Dandan up and down, it looked so small. How could it eat so much food? The amount of food was 10 times the size of it. Dandan's mouth flattened and weeping. It said in a sorrowful child's voice, "Dandan's body is growing. Of course I will be hungry. Mother, don't get angry." Okay, Hushi felt helpless. She was unable to find a way to deal with this terrible eater of food. Chapter 138. Divine Sense Imprint. Hushi put Dandan back on the ground, but it immediately tried to take advantage of her and clung to the bottom of her clothes, shouting about being hungry. This time Hushi completely ignored its spoiled child act, spreading out her hands. "Everything was eaten by you. Where would I get the ingredients from in such a short time?" I have no energy either, so there's nothing I can do. You'll just have to starve. Furthermore, I want you to clean up this mess you made. Otherwise, you'll never eat the food that I make again." Finished speaking, she no longer cared about Dandan's tantrum and instead started to examine the jade boxes. Dandan yelled for half a day, but after realizing that Hushi was really angry and was refusing to acknowledge him, he couldn't but help drop its small head, its antennae softly drooping. All of a sudden, the antennae on its head moved, and looking around at the mess in the room, it lifted its arms in the air, waving its small hands. Soon, everything was once again categorized, all neatly placed back on the shelves. Dandan looked at the shelves for a long while, letting out a giggle, and just when it was about show Hushi so she could praise it, it noticed her staring at the 8 jade boxes flying around the room with anxiousness. The antennae on its small head swayed, and suddenly understanding, it waved a claw in the air. Soon after, the light surrounding the 8 jade boxes flickered, and with a whoosh, they flew towards Hushi, abruptly stopping in front of her. Hushi stared blankly, confused about what had just happened, when Dandan used its small and short legs to run to her, pulled a corner of her clothes, and boasted, "Mother, you see, I've tidied it all up. I also helped Mother catch these disobedient boxes. Mother, aren't I awesome? Don't get angry again, okay?" Hushi touched its small head, praising it. Seeing it roll about in happiness, she couldn't help but laugh. Whether it's in an egg or this unknown shape, this little guy behaves like a 5-year-old child. Hushi picked up one of the jade boxes, first trying to open it using spiritual power, and when that failed, she used her divine sense to probe it. Unexpectedly, as soon as her divine sense touched the jade box surrounded by light, it was as if she had used a key to open a lock. The light around the jade box disappeared, and it then heavily landed on Hushi's hands. Seeing Hushi's puzzled expression, Dandan's antennae perched upright on its small head, and with a crisp and clear, childlike voice, it said, "Because Mother is the owner of Shumi Palace, these jade boxes recognize Mother's divine sense imprint. Other people have no way to open these jade boxes." Hushi suddenly understood, and collecting the remaining 7 jade boxes, she hurriedly opened them. Soon, the boxes were emptied, and everything inside was arranged neatly in front of Hushi. A hard-shelled egg the size of a chicken egg, 2 black-colored pills with unknown properties, and 5 jade slips. Hushi sat cross-legged on the ground, examining the things in front of her, unsure of what to start with. She beckoned Dandan over. "Dandan, do you know what these things are?" Dandan scratched its antennae with a small, stubby hand, confusion across its face. However, when it noticed the jade slips, its eyes lit up like it suddenly recalled something. Running over, it pulled one of the jade slips from the pile, handing it to Hushi. "Mother, I remembered. Grandpa Shumi said that he left Mother some guides. He told me to tell Mother that after the Spirit Firmament Palace door opened, to first look at this. Yes, it's this jade slip." Hushi's eyes shone, and taking the jade slip, her mind quickly sank into it. Chapter 139, New Harvest, Shumi Palace, also known as Montua Shan Mansion, was created by a Shumi Taoist using a myriad of the world's spiritual objects. Refined over many years, it has now become a divine artifact. Since the beginning, when the Mi Luo and Xian Luo continents were formed, there were rumors. These rumors said that whoever possessed Shumi Palace obtained heavenly law, and that whoever obtained heavenly law would rule all lands under heaven. Therefore, the person who inherits this divine artifact must be descended from a divine bloodline. They must harbor virtuous thoughts and beneficence towards common people, otherwise, they will be devoured whole by heavenly law itself. Shumi Palace is divided into 9 palaces and 81 doors. The 9 palaces are Spirit Firmament, Black Firmament, Green Firmament, Blue Firmament, Scarlet Firmament, Jade Firmament, Amethyst Firmament, Highest Firmament, and Divine Firmament. Each palace has 9 doors, and each of the 9 doors have a set location. But if the 9 doors open all together, a formation will be activated and the 9 doors will disappear, changing into a palace instead. Hushi continued to read, discovering that in addition to storing treasures in Spirit Firmament Palace, The biggest feature here is the time stagnation. Of course, this kind of time stagnation could only be useful for storing foods as it was unable to be used for cultivation, so its only function is keeping food fresh. When Hushi went to look at the information detailing the other palaces, she found that the text was covered by a layer of white mist, causing it to be unreadable. It seems that the information will only be readable once the palaces are unlocked. Moreover, looking at the meaning of this guide, it appeared that each palace served a different purpose. Inside each palace there are probably more treasures concealed, so once all of the palaces are open, there would be a large sum of money, enough that it could make one very wealthy. Unsatisfied by the lack of information, Hushi put the guide down and picked up the remaining jade slips. In these 4 jade slips, 3 contained the same type of content. They were ancient records from the Shumi Taoist called the All Living Things record. The All Living Things record was divided into sections documenting spiritual plants, spiritual beasts, and spiritual tools. Everything that the Shumi Taoist had seen throughout their life was described inside, and instead of vague details, each characteristic, as well as the locations of where they could be found, was documented with great care. It included information about all kinds of rare treasures, rare birds, and unusual beasts. There was even a clear image of each thing accompanying the jade slip. Wasn't the All Living Things record like a version of the Compendium of Materia Medica 1? Hushi had been afraid that because she herself is a newbie in this different world, that she wouldn't be able to recognize or understand anything and be considered a country bumpkin. Now she doesn't need to be worried. By the time Hushi had reached the last jade slip, she was positively overjoyed, her previously neutral expression transforming into a brilliant smile. Recorded in the last jade slip is the knowledge on how to refine pills, written by Old Man Shumi himself. Called the Overflowing Cauldron Pill Scripture, it lists the prescription for every kind of precious pill. In her previous life, Hushi was known as an accomplished doctor with excellent medical expertise, so when she arrived in this strange cultivation world, of course she wanted to learn how to refine pills. But unfortunately in Miluo continent, becoming a doctor is a scarce profession. The art of pill refining is secretly passed down between family members, or between master and disciple. If you were able to find a book regarding pill refining at the market, describing its basic foundation, it would be priceless. And yet here this jade slip regarding pill refining was found, listing in detail all kinds of medicine ingredients and prescription combinations. Combinations detailing the choosing and usage, how to pair them, contradictory medicines, and even how to refine fire attribute and temperature control. So once Hushi saw this, she exclaimed in joy, "Mother, I'm hungry. How about you roast this egg for me to eat?" Hushi, immersed in the Overflowing Cauldron Pill Scripture, extricated herself with reluctance as Dandan's eager voice reached her ears. Hushi turned her head in surprise, and seeing Dandan holding something round, she couldn't stop black lines from forming on her forehead. "Isn't that the nameless egg from one of the jade boxes? You're not allowed to eat that. I'll go out now to find food for you, so behave and take good care of the egg for me. If you dare eat the egg, don't ever think about eating anything in the future." 1. Materia Medica equals Latin for medical material. Here it refers to a collection of medical books. For more infos. Chapter 140. Seeing Zhuke again, what a joke. This is a treasure Old Man Shumi left. Maybe one day it would hatch into a divine beast, so if she let Dandan eat it, wouldn't she cry to death with regret? Dandan blinked its big eyes towards Hushi. "I won't eat the egg. Mother, how about you take me out so we can eat together? I'll be obedient." Hushi's brows raised. Staring at its eye-catching appearance, the corner of her mouth couldn't help but raise, and shaking her head she said, "For the time being, no. There are a lot of bad people outside. If they catch and cook you, what would you do? You better stay in the space for now. I will bring you delicious food." Old Man Shumi had said that Dandan's identity will trigger greed and desire in humans. Her current strength is too weak. How could she dare to casually bring this little guy out? Once it heard that bad people would want to catch him, Dandan's small antennae trembled with fear, leaving it no choice but to quit asking about going out. Feeling aggrieved, it held the egg as it pitifully said, "Then mother, you should quickly bring in food for me to eat." Dandan hungry. After saying that, its small face rubbed against the eggshell. Hushi has good vision and noticed that when Dandan rubbed against the egg, a faint light seemed to be emitted from within. Putting aside thoughts of the egg, she picked up the two strange pills and sniffed them. Yet without being able to figure out what they were for, and not wanting to randomly eat them, she tossed them back into a jade box, deciding to temporarily leave them for now. Withdrawing from her space, Hushi let out a long sigh of relief, her mood brighter than it had been since she had awoken. As expected, now that her strength is increasing and she finally has the ability to defend herself, she is at last able to feel a sense of security. Touching her grumbling stomach, Hushi got up and walked out of the room. Yet as she reached the inner courtyard, she stared blankly as before her eyes is a gorgeous palace with an exquisite garden on display. Just a moment ago when she was inside the room, she had noted the unfamiliar decorations and furnishings, but it wasn't until this moment, seeing this luxurious and noble residence, that she felt that her intuition was right. When she was losing consciousness after being attacked by the assassins from Drought Demon Organization, she vaguely remembered seeing a familiar face and hearing a grave voice in her ears that caused her to feel relieved. Nangongyu, that must have been Nangongyu. Hushi covered her chest with a hand and felt her heart palpitating incessantly, a grateful expression slowly emerging in her eyes. If she's not mistaken, only Nangongyu has the Yuanyang fruit, and only Nangongyu knew how to unseal her muddled dantian. Moreover, when she was being chased, the imprint on her hairpin protected her from a fatal strike, so Nangongyu certainly would have known of her situation. So, he saved her life in the nick of time, as well as helping her unseal her dantian. Thinking of this, Hushi's footsteps accelerated. At this very moment she was eagerly wanting to see Nangongyu. She didn't want to delay meeting him for another second. Looking for someone to ask for directions, Hushi had barely made it to the courtyard's gate when she heard noises from outside. The voice of the man was very familiar to Hushi as it belonged to Bai Hu, that freeloader who would come to her courtyard every day for food and drink. But that woman's voice, at first Hushi thought it was unfamiliar, yet as she continued listening, she felt it was somewhat familiar. Listening to them, she heard Bai Hu's voice cold with disapproval. "Zhuke, don't cause trouble again. This is Master's order. Don't tell me you won't even obey Master's orders?" "Zhuke, Zhuke." Hushi suddenly realized that no wonder she felt this woman's voice was unfamiliar yet familiar, and that she thought it was faintly annoying. So as it turns out, it was that arrogant woman who claimed she came to present pills to Hushi by her master's order, yet who tried to kill her instead. Saying all this, the person who saved her must really be Nangongyu. Chapter 141. What happened to Nangongyu? Hushi was just about to push the door open, when Zhukei's sharp voice came through the thick iron gate. "Bai Hu, if you still regard me as a partner considering we grew up together, then step aside. Otherwise, I will be forced to be impolite to you. Today I must slaughter that slut." Bai Hu immediately retorted, "You heard Master's words before he lost consciousness. She is Master's personally chosen princess. From now on, she is also our master. Even if I blamed her for causing harm to Master, Master's orders are not something we can ignore." "Princess? Harm Master?" Hushi, whose hands were about to slightly press on the door, froze, bewilderment appearing in her eyes. Zhuke was silent for a minute, then when she next spoke, it was in a voice sharp with anger. "Bai Hu, don't forget, Master's current condition is due to that slut harming him. If it wasn't for him saving her, how could Master still remain unconscious? I'm not able to move out of the way. Otherwise, don't blame me if I use poison against you. Zhuke, don't cause trouble without a reason. Even if you used poison, just based on your current cultivation base, how could that injure me?" Bai Hu's voice was filled with exhaustion and annoyance. What's more, Qing Long has suggested that perhaps she'll be able to cure Master. After all, Qing Long personally witnessed her curing Ouyang Haoshuan's illness. He definitely wouldn't lie about something like this and jeopardize Master's safety. Moreover, have you forgotten what's behind this door? Bai Hu's voice became cold, sharp like the edge of a sword. No one is allowed to enter Master's bedroom, including us 8 trusted subordinates. Whoever enters without permission will be killed. No excuse. The only one who is allowed to enter is Miss Nayland. Don't tell me that you still don't understand what this means." Zhu Kei's expression blanked for a moment. Then she suddenly laughed loudly, her voice full of resentment and loathing. "You believe that trash that's unable to use spiritual power will be able to cure Master? You don't want to listen to me even though I'm a 5th-rank doctor and an official member of the Doctors Association? Then could you give me your word that you can definitely cure Master?" Baihu calmly asked. Zhu Kei hesitated before she responded. Then she abruptly raised her voice. "If I'm unable to cure Master, don't tell me that that immature and inexperienced girl is able to do it. Aren't you and Qing Long being muddle-headed? The two of you believing that slut. Do you really want to kill Master?" Hushi's complexion had become extremely unsightly listening till here, and not wanting to hear anymore, she pushed the door open, her sharp eyes focusing on Baihu. "What happened to Nangongyu? They said she harmed Nangongyu. In the end, what did they mean?" Baihu and Zhu Kei were shocked. Baihu blurting out, "Miss Nayland, you? Since when have you been standing behind the door?" He is an expert on gold core stage, yet he was unaware that there had been an ordinary person listening from behind the door. Hushi didn't care about answering his question, and instead, with a calm expression on her face asked, "What happened to Nangongyu? Injured too heavily? Bring me to see him immediately." Hushi couldn't describe her mood at this moment. It's like there was a claw incessantly scratching at her heart, painful and irritating. Obviously, he is only a stranger she met by chance. But once she heard that he was seriously injured, her good mood disappeared without a trace, leaving only worry and a trace of unfamiliar fear remaining. Fear that something will happen to him. Baihu had no time to answer before Zhu Kei screamed, "Slut! It was you that harmed Master. If you hadn't seduced Master, his condition wouldn't be so life-threatening. You should just go die, you slut." Chapter 142. Overconfident in front of an expert barely finished speaking, a blade made of wind condensed on her palm, resolutely shooting towards Hushi. This time, her attack used all of her strength as she was no longer holding back. Swearing an oath to herself that she would willingly risk her life and be blamed by Master, she wanted to behead this slut on the spot. "Zhu Kei, don't!" Baihu exclaimed in alarm, a protective barrier immediately condensing on his palm to protect Hushi. However, Zhu Kei was closer to her. Without checking, he knew that it was too late to save her. His complexion couldn't help but changing. The wind blade whistled as it shot towards Hushi with deadly killing intent, sweeping up pebbles and dirt in its wake. Hushi calmly watched the wind blade approach her, neither retreating or avoiding it. Instead, a corner of her mouth slowly lifted into a ridiculing smile. Just when the wind blade was about to reach her, Hushi suddenly raised her hand. The white bone whip clutched in her fist since who knows when. The bone whip lifted slightly, and in a split second a faint golden blue light flickered, striking the wind blade and splitting it in two in the blink of an eye. The wind blade swept past her sides, raising strands of her soft black hair, and finally disappearing without a trace. Standing unharmed in the middle of the gale, Hushi sneered at Zhu Quebec, by whose mouth opened wide with shock, astonishment plastered across his face. With white skin resembling snow, eyes like brilliant jewels, and delicate facial features, the girl standing gracefully under the sunshine was just like a fairy that had descended to the mortal world. Her body didn't have any obvious spiritual power, but from her action a moment ago, Baihu could clearly sense spiritual power being used. Moreover, Baihu had never seen this type of spiritual power before. It wasn't one of the single spiritual root powers of metal, wood, water, fire, or earth. Yet neither was it one of the common variations of spiritual roots. How could this be? Did Nayland Hushi have a cultivation base or not? Compared to Baihu's astonished expression, Zhu Kei had quickly shaken off her shock, and with her face abruptly distorting, her eyes bloodshot red, she fiercely glared at Hushi as if she wanted to tear her apart. It's you who stole my cultivation base. Slut, it's you who stole my cultivation base, right? Return my cultivation base." Hushi looked at Zhu Kei with her expression as cold as ice, her eyes mocking, "Oh, I see. So your cultivation base has dropped from early gold core stage to mid-meridian stage. No wonder that wind blade strike was like a gentle breeze, completely lacking in power. Hearing that caused Zhu Ke to immediately become crazy and hysterically rush towards Hushi. Nalan Hushi, you stole my cultivation base. You must die. Even if I'm only mid-meridian stage, I'll still be able to kill you. I will dismember your body into 1,000 pieces. As Zhu Ke shouted, she withdrew one of her handmade poison powders, fiercely tossing it at Hushi. One must know that this poison powder was made when she was still a gold core stage martial artist, so even a martial artist of the same rank would be somewhat fearful to come into contact with it. While Nalan Hushi was someone who had only recently advanced from the chi refining stage, so how would she be able to withstand it? Once this poison powder touched a person's body, their skin will itch as it rots, inch by inch, not stopping until they finally turn into a stinking corpse, their bones dried up and their flesh like liquid. Nalan Hushi, you harmed me, so if I can't dismember your body, I will instead break your bones and scatter the ashes of your corpse. Until then, I cannot avenge the hatred in my heart. As the powder spread, Hushi sniffed the air and could smell a particular stench. A corner of her mouth lifted into a cold smile, and sneering, she said, unexpectedly, you dare use poison in front of your ancestor. You're practically playing with an axe at the doorway of Lu Ban's house. 1. Overestimating your capabilities like this. 1. It is said that Lu Ban, influenced by the fact that the leaves of Kogon grass are shaped like the teeth of a saw, invented the saw, and that he constructed a bird out of bamboo strips that could fly in the air for 3 days and 3 nights without falling. Lu Ban had a number of inventions, which is the reason why he is worshipped by Chinese people as the founder of carpentry as a trade. To play with an axe at the doorway to Lu Ban's house is, of course, indicative of not knowing one's own limitation. Chapter 143, Princess? What rubbish is this? Barely pausing after speaking, Hushi's hand was already in motion as she tossed out a handful of silver poison at Zhu Ke's approaching poison powder. What happened next caused the people present to become stunned. The blackish-gray poison powder and the silver powder were like nemesis meeting midair. When they collided, it was like time stopped as they both hovered in the sky, forming an ash-gray barrier that caused everyone's hair to stand on end. Subsequently, Hushi lightly brandished the bone whip in her hand and strong spiritual power erupted, knocking aside the poison barrier. The mixed poisons then, without pause, flew straight towards Zhu Quebec. Zhu Ke's eyes opened wide with fright, horror expressed on her face. When she threw the poison powder, she had been utterly confident that Hushi would die, so unfortunately, she hadn't made any defense preparations. So when the poisons headed towards her, she was completely caught off guard. The tip of her nose smelled a familiar stench, causing Zhu Ke's body to shake all over and despair to surge within her heart. The next moment, a protective barrier appeared in front of Zhu Ke, in a flash obstructing the poisons from reaching her. The poison powder and the silver powder then gently fluttered to the ground. After barely touching the ground, the silver powder began to evaporate, the poison powder soon following and also disappearing without a trace. However, what is most horrifying of all is that the ground where the silver powder landed, there were burnt holes remaining. These is a so-called divine medical poison. After committing a crime, it will naturally evaporate and disappear without a trace. Not even a hair will remain. Compared to Zhu Ke's handmade poison, this melting bone silver powder was 1,000 times more formidable. Previously, Hushi didn't have any spiritual power, so she had no way to infuse the melted bone poison into a martial artist's body, but it will be different from now on. She still has many hideous poisons in her hands waiting to be improved, so if any people dared to provoke her, she absolutely wouldn't show mercy. Bai Hu saw the complete evaporation, the corroded ground due to the silver powder, and horror bubbled forth in his heart. Although these poisons didn't injure him, if they were used against an ordinary low-level martial artist, it would be absolutely fatal. In just a few days, Miss Nalan's strength has increased to such a degree. No wonder to her, master is so. As he raised his head, His eyes that looked towards Hushi were filled with fear and respect. Yet in the end, Zhu Ke is their comrade, someone they grew up with. Princess, Zhu Ke is presumptuous and intended to attack Princess. She ought to be punished. But even if she's guilty, she shouldn't die. Please, Princess, spare her life. Princess? Hushi's brows wrinkled. What sort of name is this? Just as she was about to open her mouth and ask, Zhu Ke, who was standing behind Baihu, once again went mad, wanting to rush towards Hushi. You think with just your little cultivation base that you can really compete with me? Before I was only momentarily tricked by you. This time I must kill. Zhu Ke had barely finished her threat when Baihu lifted his hand and released a powerful burst of spiritual pressure towards her. Zhu Ke's complexion changed, and quivering all over, she spat out a mouthful of blood with a puff. In disbelief, she raised her head and stared at Baihu. You go so far as to injure me for an unknown slut. Good. Baihu, you saw that I was harmed by this woman and lost my cultivation base. So now you want to push me further into a pit of despair too? Chapter 144. A life close to death at this moment. The annoyance is clear on Baihu's face as he looked at Zhu Ke. The light in his eyes as cold as ice. Zhu Ke, you've crossed the line. I will report your conduct and deeds of today to Master. Wait until Master wakes up. You should think about how you'll explain this. Finished speaking, he no longer paid attention to Zhu Ke. Instead, looking towards Hushi, Princess, Qinglong requested that I immediately bring you to see Master once you were awake. If you would follow me? Hushi frowned. Her worry for Nangongyu her main focus. How's Nangongyu now? Master fell into a coma late last night, and up until now there has been no signs he would awaken. Every doctor in the manor, including Zhu Ke, has examined him. But as of yet we've been completely unable to do anything for him. We're currently helpless. Hushi promptly said, Bring me to him. Compared to Nangongyu's safety, settling accounts with Zhu Ke and caring about being called princess were insignificant worries. Moreover, when she thought of using melting bone poison to kill Zhu Ke, she now realized it would be too cheap a death for her. If Zhu Ke tried to provoke her again, she has many amusing games prepared, all waiting to play with her till the end. Baihu quickly walked ahead, leading the way. When he passed by Zhu Ke, his cold gaze noticed the resentment on her face, so he just helplessly shook his head. All of Nangongyu's subordinates were aware of Zhu Ke's feelings towards Master. They had even openly or secretly advised her. However, for her own selfish desires, she had disregarded Master's orders. This Zhu Ke. It seems like she wouldn't be staying long in Hell King Manor. There was quite a distance to the place where Nangongyu cultivates, and the whole way there, Hushi kept trying to remember what happened last night. Yet no matter how hard she tried, she has no impressions of what had occurred. Sneaking a glance at Baihu from the side, she saw that his face was taut due to his displeasure. With his icy expression, he no longer resembled the enthusiastic gossiper she had come to know at her courtyard. Hushi could clearly sense that his discontent and resentment was aimed at her, because it was because of her that Nangongyu was unconscious. Was it Nangongyu who saved me yesterday? Baihu's footsteps slightly paused, a corner of his mouth rising in a faint curve. Yes, Princess. All of them had personally seen Hushi's dying appearance yesterday. If Master hadn't done everything he could to save her, it's likely that Hushi wouldn't have been able to survive, let alone have her strength rise to such a degree. However, because of her, Master is now in a coma, his life close to death. This resulted in Baihu unable to do anything but hate Hushi. If she didn't exist, Master surely would have been able to withstand his illness like previously, without it being so life-threatening this time. Princess again? Hushi frowned. I'm not your princess. Baihu snorted, his tone formal and distant. I apologize, but this is Master's command. Even if we're unwilling, we can only obey. Since Master said that you are to be called princess, then you are to be called princess. To hell with it. Nangongyu said that I'm to be called princess, so I'm called princess? Does no one ask her opinion? Furthermore, why on earth has Nangongyu commanded his subordinates to call her princess? Has his brain short-circuited? But before Hushi could refute Baihu, They had already arrived at Nangong Yu's recuperation room, so she could only quickly focus on the task at hand. Standing in front of Nangong Yu's room, there was a crowd of people that included Qing Long, as well as 3 noticeable men. Next to Qing Long, there is a tall and thin man dressed in black, his eyes bright and sharp, with a temperament somewhat similar to Qing Long. Hushi had already met 3 of Nangong Yu's personal bodyguards and knew they were named after the 4 divine beasts, Qing Long, Bai Hu, and Zhu Ke. So then this is probably Xian Wu. Chapter 145. Cold Poison. Standing beside Xian Wu is a young man dressed in a moon-white brocade robe, his features bright and handsome, while his expression resembled an ice sculpture. His imposing manner gave off a warning, keeping strangers from coming close. Hushi's intuition faintly told her that this person is more powerful than Qing Long. His temper seemed to be very cold and indifferent, yet she had no idea who he is. When her gaze fell on the third person, she startled slightly. She has actually met this person before, yet he didn't leave a deep impression. He was the auctioneer at Gluttonous House, Wu Yu. Wu Yu noticed Hushi's surprise as she looked at him, a corner of his mouth raising into a smile. Serene eyes with hidden depths made it impossible for people to guess what he is thinking. Qing Long watched Hushi arrive, and without greeting her, he immediately said, "You, come with me." In a flash, the door to the room was pushed open and Hushi followed him in. After barely entering the room, her senses were assaulted by a blast of heat. Fine beads of sweat started to form on her forehead and furrowing her eyebrows. She quickly used a small amount of water spiritual power to resist the heat. Only then was she able to feel comfortable. Qing Long saw Hushi's body produce pure spiritual power, and his eyes slightly revealed his astonishment as he explained, "The cold poison in Master's body has begun to enter his heart. We have tried everything we could think of to suppress it, but so far it's only helped a little." Walking around a corner, they came upon a large bed. Smoke filled the room, raising the temperature, and lying on the bed with the smoke wafting around him is Nangong Yu. At her first glance of Nangong Yu, Hushi's eyes suddenly narrowed. The man on the bed is only wearing a white silk robe, and with his hair undone, eyes tightly closed, his handsome appearance resembled a jade sculpture from afar. The inside of the room is clearly burning hot, yet his face didn't have the slightest trace of color. Instead, his white complexion seemed to be frozen and transparent. Hushi had never seen Nangong Yu like this before. In her impressions of him, Nangong Yu is always elegant, filled with demonic charm, a pervert, and completely ostentatious. But the Nangong Yu of this moment looks so fragile, as if he could break with just one touch. Without waiting for Qing Long to present her, Hushi quickly stepped forward and grabbed Nangong Yu's wrist. So cold. Hushi's hand shivered slightly. She is obviously holding a person's wrist, but it felt like she was holding a piece of jade just removed from the freezer. And this kind of cold, as she is touching it, she had the illusion it was permeating into her bones. Hushi focused, and using her spiritual power to slowly penetrate his pulse, she began to examine his body. After maintaining this position for longer than it took to burn a stick of incense, her eyebrows started wrinkling tighter and tighter. Qing Long's expression as he watched her was anxious, like he was slowly being burnt. Several times he wanted to interrupt Hushi and inquire about his master's condition, but he was afraid that disturbing her treatment would be harmful to his master. Just when his patience had almost reached his limit, Hushi finally released her hand. Yet the wrinkle between her eyebrows still didn't loosen. Qing Long quickly asked, "How's master? Can he be cured?" If even this genius Dr. Shiyu that cured Ouyang Haoshuan is helpless, then they would have no other choice but to request help from an elder from the Doctors Association, and that would be Zhu Ke's master. But if this were to happen, then master's situation would be known by other people, and at that time, Hell King Manor would no longer be able to maintain its transcendent position. This might also lead to master attracting a fatal disaster. Thinking about this, Qing Long's hand that was gripping his sword firmly tightened. His eyes gazing at Hushi, unconsciously filling with a trace of hope. Chapter 146. Treatment Plan. Hushi pondered for a moment, then slowly said, Nangong Yu's illness. How old was he when this began to attack? Qinglong promptly replied, this illness has accompanied Master since he began to successfully cultivate spiritual power, and he became able to draw vital energy into his body. Every 7th day of the 7th month, it will flare up, attacking the blood throughout his body and causing it to freeze, while his meridians become stiff and frail. This situation lasts for 3 days, and only then does it slowly improve, so that by the 5th day, Master will be completely restored like usual. Hearing what Qinglong said, Hashi's face slightly revealed her surprise. Turning her head, she looked all around the room, then said, every year when Nangong Yu's illness flares, does he use a strong young object to suppress the cold poison in his body? She pointed at the steam rising and curling out from a high-quality fire crystal stone. Not this thing or yuanyang fruit. These aren't enough by far to suppress the cold poison in his body. How did you know? Qinglong blurted out, his face full of surprise as an enthusiastic light burst in his eyes. Yes, every year when it nears the 7th month, Master will enter the flame cave for seclusion. Only the yang from the flame cave is able to suppress the cold energy in Master's body. Qinglong was just about to explain why Nangong Yu hadn't yet entered the flame cave, but noticed Hashi nodding, the realization on her face as she said, I've heard about the flame cave. Located in the center of the cave, there is heavenly yang fire. It is said that it's able to entirely burn all living things on the world. If it's the flame cave, then it would indeed be possible to suppress Nangong Yu's cold poison. Of course, this wasn't what she had heard. Rather, she knew all this from before, when she had read the All Living Things record. But, Hashi frowned, her expression slowly becoming complex as she looked at Nangong Yu on the bed. The fire element in the flame cave is violent and extreme, even to Nangong Yu's body. After entering for so long, the body will start to suffer from irreversible damage. Therefore, for him to enter the flame cave, it is necessary his body is in peak condition, or else he would be unable to bear the intense yang fire. But in order to save me, this guy, in order to save her, did he go so far because he didn't treasure his life? However, they're both just strangers coming together by chance, so why? What did he really want? The expressions on her face continuously changed between guilt and gratefulness, while there was even one of heartache. When she started feeling doubt, for a moment she even forgot to maintain the water's spiritual power, causing her to nearly be unable to stand the impact from the heat wave. Qinglong's face revealed his rapture. His eyes no longer glared at Hashi with condemnation and doubt. Rather, they were full of hope. He repeatedly nodded as he said, what Princess said is true. Every year near the 7th month, Master will enter seclusion, adjusting his cultivation base and strength to be the best they can be. Once the 7th day arrives, he withdraws to the flame cave. Outsiders think it's for seclusion, but just as Princess said, every time Master leaves the flame cave, the injuries to his meridians and dantian increase. Each year we all worry for Master, wondering if he'll be able to hold on or not. Pausing for a while, he then slowed his voice and asked in a whisper, Princess, do you have a treatment method? Hashi didn't answer. Instead, she lightly tapped the bed with her finger as she pondered. After a long while, she frowned and said, for now, I'm unable to think of a method to solve the root of the problem, but I have a plan to temporarily alleviate his illness. We just need to make it like he's cultivating in the flame cave to get him through this difficult time. But this plan is only an idea. I've never implemented it on other patients, and my treatment plan is completely different of that from your doctor, so I'll leave it up to you all to decide if you're willing to follow it or not. Chapter 147. I will definitely cure you, Qinglong promptly asked. May I ask Princess to describe the details of the treatment plan? Hashi nodded, then listed out a series of herb names: jade marrow mushroom, 7 red cloud lotus, heavenly spirit fruit, congeal grass. You only need to find these herbs, that would do? Qinglong's face immediately showed doubt when he heard what was said. Congeal grass has an extremely strong cold attribute, if it's taken alone. Taking too much can cause the cold poison to flare in an ordinary martial artist, and they would lose their life. Currently, Master's cold poison has flared up. How can you? Hashi lifted her eyes. her gaze indifferent as she looked at him and lightly laughed. That said, my treatment plan is different compared to other doctors, so the medicinal ingredients I use will also be different. If you don't have any confidence in it, you may refuse to employ it. Qing Long startled, momentarily hesitant as he requested, "Please allow this subordinate to discuss this with the others." Hushi nodded. "You had best decide as soon as possible, though. With Nangong Yu's condition, it cannot be delayed. In another 6 hours, I can't be certain that I'll be able to save his life." With anxiousness on his face, Qing Long's figure flashed as he instantly disappeared from the room. Now, only Nangong Yu and Hushi remained in the room, resembling a sauna. Hushi quietly looked at the unconscious Nangong Yu, and after a moment of hesitation, she couldn't help but extend her hand, softly caressing his face. Nangong Yu's slender eyebrows arched gracefully towards his temples, while the bridge of his nose is high and straight. He has thin and finely shaped lips and long eyelashes that gently fluttered, casting faint silhouettes against his cheeks. His skin is snow white, almost transparent, and under his thin skin it is almost possible to see faint blue-green veins, his aura fragile yet beautiful. Hushi will always remember that when those ink-black eyes were open, they looked at all lands under heaven with arrogance, displaying a willfulness to all. How they burned like fire, with serene and hidden depths. "Nangong Yu, the colding object, was it your own blood?" She softly whispered in his ear. "You and I obviously only met by chance, so why do you go to such lengths for me?" From when she was a child till now, if anyone around her was good to her, it was in order to take advantage of her, squeezing her for everything she was worth. So much so that finally, the partner who had braved fire and water with her, who had risked life and limb with her countless times, Lingya, betrayed her. Such experiences had caused Hushi unable to believe anyone, unable to open her heart and accept anyone. However, Nangong Yu's conduct and deeds were making her originally sealed heart crack. On one hand, she wants to believe him, while on the other hand, she is afraid she is being taken advantage of. "In any case, I will definitely cure you," Hushi murmured. "Even if it was just you being kind, I will definitely cure your illness completely." In fact, Nangong Yu's current condition isn't that severe, so she is utterly certain that she can use ordinary prescriptions to suppress what ails him. Unfortunately, what made Hushi afraid is that she had used countless methods to check Nangong Yu's body, but she still couldn't find the source of the cold energy within him. Obviously, there is no source, and also no sign of poison, but with the passage of time his body is gradually becoming colder, so much so that even his dantian is slowly showing signs of freezing. This caused Hushi to feel puzzled. Apparently, she wouldn't be able to find the cause of Nangong Yu's illness in such a short amount of time. So currently the only thing to do is alleviate his symptoms, putting the discussion on hold until later and helping him pass this stage first. Qing Long went outside to inform Wu Xian and the others the details of Hushi's diagnoses and her proposed treatment plan. Chapter 148. Sacrificing your lives. As he finished speaking, Zhu Ke, who had just rushed over, let out a sharp protest. "Qing Long, is there something wrong with your head? Congeal grass is a cold plant. That slut wants to use congeal grass and deliberately harm Master's life, yet you believe her?" Zhu Ke's voice became sluggish, then she abruptly shouted loudly, "I can't cure Master's illness, but my teacher can. She's a third-generation elder of the Doctors' Association. Any incurable disease will completely recover by her hands. As long as we invite my teacher to come here, she will certainly be able to cure Master." As Zhu Ke's voice faded, Wu Xian raised his hand, and a sudden attack of strong wind knocked her to the ground. Zhu Ke cut a sorry figure as she tumbled about, a trickle of blood flowing from a corner of her mouth. Her complexion was deathly pale as she glared at the people around her, her cold eyes containing fierce anger and hatred. Wu Xian coldly snorted, his sword-like gaze thrust towards her. "Zhu Ke, don't forget our oath. Anyone who leaks Master's condition is committing an act of betrayal, suffering heaven's punishment. Even if the person you leaked it to is your teacher, it's still the same." Zhu Ke's body trembled under the force of Wu Xian's power. When she remembered that she was now only so weak because of that slut Nailin Hushi, the resentment in her heart fiercely blazed, burning ever more vigorously. You're all a group of idiots. To actually be played with by an unknown woman and run around in circles, it's clear that my teacher's ability is the one thing that will most likely be able to make Master recover, and yet none of you believe in me or my teacher, instead believing in that slut. Zhu Kei sneered as she laughed loudly, her face distorting with a sinister smile. Coupled with the scars on her face, it looked terrible and ugly. In this case, this slut can't cure Master's illness, no. Instead, this slut wants to make Master take enchanting grass, so she clearly wants to kill Master. If Master suffers a mishap because of your decision, then you will all be at fault. You will all have to apologize by sacrificing your lives for your offenses. Qing Long and the others looked at each other in dismay, their expressions revealing their indecision. After all, if Hushi harbored malicious intentions, it's likely her treatment will harm Nangongyu's life. But if they didn't use Hushi's treatment plan, they were still helpless. Did they really need to request help from the Doctors Association? That would be introducing a potential source of future trouble, and if Master was awake, he definitely wouldn't approve of this decision. In the end, what should they do? You said that if I can't cure Nangongyu, they must sacrifice their lives. So then if I can cure him? Suddenly, a clear and distinct woman's voice sounded from inside the door, causing everyone to immediately look towards the direction the voice came from. Before their eyes, Hushi, disguised as a youth, unhurriedly walked out from inside the room. Although she is wearing men's clothes, without anything else to disguise her appearance, all it took was one glance for everyone to be able to see that she is clearly a woman. Her exquisite, snow-white skin glistened under the sunshine, and her hair is moist due to perspiration, causing some of it to stick to her cheeks and border her picturesque features. With her bright eyes and white teeth, it made her resemble a fairy born amongst the dawn mist, so beautiful that it stunned and dazzled everyone. Everyone's heart became distracted as they looked at her, secretly thinking, no wonder the always cold-hearted and emotionless Master treats Miss Nailin differently compared to anyone else. Chapter 149. Make a bet, but when Zhu Kei saw Hushi looking this way, she could only feel the jealousy in her heart burning. Her glaring eyes resembled a dead fish's eyes as they protruded out, and as she fiercely focused on Hushi, the scars on her face kept trembling. Sucking in a deep breath, she spoke in a stern voice, Nailin Hushi, I haven't asked what vicious thoughts you have in mind, but since Master's cold poison has flared up and you want to use enchanting grass on him, you clearly want to harm Master's life. Don't think your flowery words that can deceive Qing Long and the others can fool me. I'm a 5th-rank doctor acknowledged by the Doctors Association. With just your 3-legged cat's ability, you dare to say that you're more powerful than me. Hushi sneered, her gaze as she looked at Zhu Kei full of contempt and disdain. Such big talk, Zhu Quebec. You should wait until you've healed the scars on your face before you say that to me again. The expression on Zhu Kei's face abruptly stiffened, and she subconsciously covered her face with a hand. From the moment she saw Master carrying this slut back, she had forgotten everything else, her mind muddled by her burning jealousy. For a while, she didn't have the time to care about the veil on her face falling off, but now, thinking of other people seeing her ugly appearance, fear started to appear in her eyes. For a woman like Zhu Kei who wished to appear beautiful to everyone, her appearance meant everything to her. She especially feared appearing so ugly like this in front of Master. Zhu Kei's features twisted, the expression in her eyes full of hostility as she looked at Hushi. Slut, you haven't yet realized that the scar on your face is growing bigger and turning blacker? Hushi indifferently interrupted her. To tell you the truth, one day that scar will spread to cover your whole face, emitting an unpleasant smell. Ah, it must feel wonderful, but aren't you a 5th-rank doctor? I believe that you will certainly be able to cure it. Zhu Kei's eyes suddenly widened with her alarm, incredulousness filling her face. No, she totally didn't believe Hushi's words. There is no such poison in this world. But the way this slut said it, as if she was making a solemn vow, what if by chance it was true? Hushi ignored Zhu Kei's panic, instead restraining her expression as she said, "Let's return back to the point about how I can use congeal grass and the other medicines I mentioned. Making Nangong Yu awaken and helping him get through his illness this time. Impossible." Zhu Ke blurted out. Congeal grass is extremely cold. It will only increase Master's symptoms. How could cure you Master's illness? Oh, then since you don't believe me, how about we make a bet? Hushi gently played with the jade ornament hanging at her waist, smirking as she said, "If I can't awaken Nangong Yu, I'll accept your punishment." Zhu Ke promptly raised her voice and roared, "If you can't cure Master, I shall cut your face and use poison to corrode the skin all over your body." A sword-like coldness flashed in Hushi's eyes, and she slowly said, "I have no hesitations to agreeing, but what if I cure Nangong Yu?" Zhu Ke blanked for a moment, then sneered as she coldly laughed. "Using these medicines you've listed, you will absolutely be unable to awaken Master. You're just raving like a lunatic. If you're truly able to cure Master, I will discard my cultivation base and henceforth no longer be a doctor. Will this do?" Hushi faintly smiled, and no longer paying attention to Zhu Ke, she turned around and looked at Qinglong. "Immediately prepare the medicines I've asked for." Chapter 150. Dried up spiritual plants. Qinglong looked hesitant, before he frowned and said, "Princess, there is something this subordinate forgot to tell you, but about preparing those herbs, there may be some difficulties." Hushi raised her eyebrows, revealing her surprise. Those medicines were just common spiritual plants. Only the congeal grass is a fourth-grade herb. Although it's considered precious, based on the Hell King Manor's wealth and influence, how could they not get it? Qinglong glanced at her with a complex expression in his eyes. Yesterday and last night, it appears that all the spiritual plants in the city were sucked dry, causing them to wither and die. Even the spiritual plants stored in jade boxes were not spared, especially all those stalks of congeal grass. Although it's only a fourth-grade spiritual plant, it belonged to a rare species, so we really don't know where to find it. Hushi startled, suddenly recalling that along the way when she came here, all the places she passed were indeed without any green. So actually, all the spiritual plants are dead. Seeing Hushi frown, Zhu Ke at once laughed loudly. "So as it turns out, you knew that all the spiritual plants had withered, and were only trying play me with this bet. You knew your method was unachievable, so you deliberately made a show of being earnest, as if you were actually taking things seriously. Slut, can you not be so shameless? Don't think that just because all the spiritual plants have withered that you don't have to fulfill our bet. I will still destroy your face." Qinglong and the others frowned as they listened, feeling that Zhu Ke has already gone insane. In order to settle her grudge with Hushi, she was even ignoring Master's safety. By who suddenly spoke, "Zhu Ke, doesn't your teacher have a portable medicine garden? That's a heaven and earth treasure, so the herbs inside were surely spared of having their spiritual energy sucked away. You should quickly ask her for several kinds of herbs. Perhaps it's not too late." "For what reason?" Zhu Ke screamed, and then continued hysterically, "Why should I help this slut? If we want to cure Master, we only need to invite my teacher to come. Even if I'm dead, I will still refuse to help this slut." After hearing Zhu Ke's rant, Qinglong, Wu Xian, and the others glared at her with barely contained fury. Regardless of the bet's result between her and Nalan Hushi, this type of Zhu Ke absolutely mustn't stay in Hell King Manor. Once Master awakens, we'll see how he punishes her. Hushi, however, looked calmly at Qinglong, saying, "Take me to see the manor's medicine garden." Qinglong startled, astonishment on his face. "Princess, the spiritual plants in the medicine garden have all died. Not even a single stalk remains." Hushi shallowly laughed, then slowly said, "What I want to see are the dead spiritual plants." In this world, dead spiritual plants didn't have any value. This is why they used jade boxes to pack spiritual plants for business transactions, because once a spiritual plant withers, its spiritual energy disappears. If you tried to refine pills with them, they wouldn't be able to mix with the other ingredients or withstand the heat needed to temper the pills, so they naturally didn't have any effect. But Hushi is different. She wanted those spiritual plants to use like traditional Chinese medicines. For the so-called traditional Chinese medicine, in order for long-term preservation, it can be preserved through the processing of drying. If it's withered, it doesn't affect the effectiveness of the medicines at all. Zhuke eagerly wished to see Hushi's humiliation once she failed. She had better be aware. The medicine garden in Hell King Manor is very large. Moreover, because there was a spiritual formation placed around it, the spiritual energy had been extremely rich. But at this moment, the field is barren. All the plants had withered and become ashes. The crystal stones strategically placed for the spiritual formation had also lost their spiritual energy, turning into dust. Hushi sighed. How could this be? As she met Qinglong's conflicted gaze, he said, Princess, do you really not remember what happened last night? You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.